Hey guys, didn't realize you were here already. Today I'd like to show you how to make a serious profit on some Christmas projects, things that you can sell, get yourself some money in the bank for those Christmas presents you need to buy for your loved ones. Let's get to the shop and get working. Alright, so to start this project off, we're going to need a chunk of our cedar fence picket here that we're using. And we're going to mark this out at 22 inches. Let's head over to the miter saw to get this cut. Since we're going for speed on this, I'm going to go ahead and sand the face before we cut our individual pieces, and that way we can sand it all at once. We know that it's all smooth. Once we cut it out, there's just a little bit of light hand sanding to be able to finish these. So let's get the vacuum on. We've got 120 grit paper on our sander and get the face of this flattened out. Now what I did here was I sanded one side smooth and the other side I left the blade marks from the milling process when they cut these up. That's going to give me one rustic side that I can work with and the other flat side that you'll see for different steps coming up. Now let's go ahead and get these cut to length and we'll mark out the shape of each of our trees. For these particular trees that I'm making, we're going to do one at 9-inch. Another one that's just 7 inches past that. And that's going to leave our last one at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 inches. Now we've got a tall, a medium, and a short that don't have exact step downs between the measurements, and this keeps the nice visual appearance of having abstract pieces together as a set. Now we're going to get the trees drawn on these so that we can go over and cut them out on the bandsaw. I drew each of these in somewhat of a different orient. One curves to the left, one curves to the right, and then one stays fairly straight. That's so when we put them together as a set of 3, they've got some kind of a movement instead of all looking identical in different sizes. There's multiple ways that you can make this cut. I have a bandsaw, so I'm going to use this. But you could also use a jigsaw to get your curved cuts. You could use a multi-tool to get your curved cuts. You could use a scroll saw, and if you don't even have access to power, you could always just use a coping saw to cut these out. Now that we've got our smallest one cut, I'm gonna speed through and wrap up these other two. So here we've got our small, our medium, and our large tree cut for our 3-piece set. I want to sand these down. I don't want to get rid of any of these bandsaw marks on the side. This keeps the nice rustic handmade look. But I do want to break the edges on this. As you can see, this cedar really has a tendency to just kind of peel and flake. And by hitting those corners, that's going to ensure that these pieces last a long time for the customer. Alright, so we've hit all of our edges, and we need to figure out what we want the front and the back of each piece to be. I like to keep the pattern here where our outside pieces are curving in and our smallest center is straight. That keeps everything in a nice curved motion. And the way we're going to finish these is actually going to be 3 different applications. I'll show you each application now and how these really work together and complement each other. I'm going to give you guys a really quick tip here on painting these, and that's to use this cheap craft paint here. It's a little thick when it's in the bottle, so we're actually going to mix it with some water and thin it out. What that's going to do is make it a lot easier to spread our paint on the piece. It's going to soak into the wood grain some, and what we'll be finished with is almost a white stained wood. So we're going to mix this up until we've got the consistency of a drip, but not so wet that it's like water running off. You can see here. For a paintbrush, I'm just going to take a piece of paper towel, tear off a little strip, and fold it up like this. Dip our paper towel into our white paint here, and I'm going to hit our medium tree with this white. Just kind of spread it all around, all over, get it down in the nooks and crannies. Try to evenly spread this out, and the cool thing that you'll see is it leaves our wood grain showing behind it, as opposed to just painting the piece solid where all of the paint is sitting on top. And I like to save these little cut off triangle pieces from my projects. That gives us a raised surface so that we can let our paint dry on both sides. We don't have to take turns painting one side, letting that dry, flipping it, and then doing the other side. Just go ahead and paint both of those at the same time, let them dry at the same time together. So again, we can go on kind of thick, work that in, and just kind of spread it out evenly throughout our piece. We'll use some of this excess to go ahead and start hitting our edges. And this goes to show you really don't need a lot of expensive things. You really don't even need to buy paintbrushes to do some of these projects. Make sure everything's nice and even. Make sure you're not leaving big globs of paint anywhere. And that's about the finish that we're going for right there. You can still see the wood grain through it, but compared to a natural piece, you can see how much lighter that gets. Set that on our blocks to the side to dry, and we'll work on our next one. For this one, we're going to be doing a green, and then I'm going to come through with a solid white and hit all of our upward facing branches, so that way it looks like snowfall that has just naturally fallen onto the tops of those tree branches. Now with our green tree, we're going to get this really cool effect where I'm going to use our green paint mixed with the water to get a green stain. And then we're going to come back with our opaque white that is unmixed so that our snow is going to look nice and solid on the tops of the branches, but our tree, you're still going to see the wood grain behind it. Let's get our paintbrush together here. Get our blocks laid out so that we can set it down while we're working. And then we'll just start on one side, flip it and do the other side and the branches, so that way anywhere that we don't have white will be our nice green tint. You can see when we're rubbing this on, you can just kind of be liberal with it, let a lot of that green soak in, and spread around any excess so you don't have it pulled up, leaving a solid green on top. There you have it with our green. We kept our wood grain pattern. We went ahead and hit all the sides. We're going to leave this up on our blocks for it to now dry. Let's go ahead and get the clear on our biggest piece, this one here, because we're going to need that clear to dry and set up before we actually do our final touches to this one. Does anybody else hate the lids that they put on these cans these days? I remember when every 4-year-old could get their hands on a spray paint can, pop that lid off, and do a nice little graffiti piece on their parents' garage floor. Seems like these days they don't even want the adults playing with it. So what I've got here is a Minwax polyclear. It's water-based and it's going to dry fairly quick, so we can really bash these pieces out and just keep the assembly line moving. And you can see I'm putting this on kind of thick. I only want to have to put on one coat of this. It goes on a little bit milky, but when it dries, it's perfectly clear. Okay, now that we've got the clear on our natural piece dry, we can move that out of the way. We're gonna bring, woo, big mess. We're gonna bring our white piece into center here. And we want to choose which side is our flat side. Remember, we flattened one side and we left the back side with the saw marks and everything. That was so we can make the front of our natural one kind of rustic with the saw marks on it. And then we want the front of this one to be flat. This is our next step. We're going to come to the flat side and we're going to take Mod Podge, which you can pick up at any store. Open this stuff up here. And we're just gonna brush this on kind of liberally here. Make sure everything is completely coated. Make sure you get all the way to the edges of your branches on here. Got a little brush bristle. I'm using these natural bristle brushes just because they're cheap. So we're gonna brush that on right like that. Make sure everything's coated. Make sure you really get to the tips of these little corners here. That's going to come into play. And we're going to let this sit and let this dry now. And while this is drying, we'll go ahead and get our white for our snow on our green tree. That'll be a second one finished up. So we're going to get our white paint. Just get a little scrap piece of paper towel. And let's get our white paint on here to use. And what we want to do first is determine which side is our front. I really like the grain pattern that you can see here. You've got the heavy light grains in this side, so we're going to make this our front. And what I'm going to do is on this top section here, we're just going to completely coat. And I'm not going down underneath. You can see I left the green underneath. That's because if snow was naturally falling, you have to think of where it would hit. It would hit the top and it wouldn't necessarily blow up underneath. So we're gonna come down about halfway through and we're gonna get the white on these below here, okay? Halfway through that one. And then we'll come down about halfway through this one and do the same thing. And if you're really batching these out, you can use a brush. I'm not opposed to using a brush. I just don't feel like dirtying up a brush when I can just pitch this little scrap piece of paper towel here and show that you guys don't really have to spend much of anything to make stuff like this. There we go. We've got the corners of all these hit. I'm going to go ahead and brighten up with another layer on this top one. As you can see, the bottoms are kind of coating a little bit thicker than the top. But we still, where there's green showing through, just let that show right on through. There we go, right like that. Now, we're going to come to the front. We don't need to worry so much as the back, as these are meant to be a front displayed piece. But we're going to come to the front and just kind of dab on you know, where you think that snow would naturally be laying. So I'm gonna say right on down through here like this on this top edge. Kind of get some streaking in there a little bit. It's okay to leave it a little thick, it'll still dry perfectly fine. We'll get our next one right where the snow starts is where we're gonna start our streak here. Kind of brush on down through there. And then the bottom right where it's at, right there, we'll brush on down through there as well. Right like that. And you can see what we're left with is just kind of the little peaks there of our branches covered in snow. Let's come over and hit the other side here. We'll do the same exact pattern that we have. Just kind of brush it in there. Leave your streaks. Remember, we don't need everything to look perfect. Right like that. Come and hit the ones below. I'm really digging the look of that. I like that, so we're gonna set that to the side to let that dry. We'll put it back on our little triangles that we had set up here. So now we've got our green done, we've got our clear done. We're waiting for our Mod Podge to finish drying on here. I'm gonna let this sit for about 15 minutes, maybe 20, kind of let this Mod Podge set up here, get rid of some of our trash, and then we'll come back and we'll finish these up completely. All right, this is where the magic finally happens. So we've got a piece of paper. This is actually scrapbook paper. It's a little thicker than, you know, wrapping paper, but wrapping paper would also work for this job. What we're really looking for is just a Christmas pattern, something that's gonna complement, you know, all of our colors that are associated with this. And we're gonna take our white tree that we put our Mod Podge on, with the Mod Podge facing up, this is our front. We're gonna take this piece that we cut out for this one here. We're gonna place it on the top, and then just a piece of parchment paper to keep our iron from burning our paper. Lay our parchment paper over the top like that. I've got this turned on medium. It's not super hot, so that way, you know, hopefully we don't have to worry about burning our paper. But this is gonna melt that Mod Podge just a little bit so it becomes adhesive, and it's gonna be like a sticker back on this piece of paper. So just press it nice and evenly. Don't really sit anywhere for too awful long. We're just gonna kind of work it around our piece here. And then I'll come through and check and see what our adhesion looks like. Looks like we're nice and stuck all through here. This corner could use just a little bit of love. We're stuck all through here. These corners here need hit again, and the very top. So we need to hit all of our little corners again. So what we can do is come back in and just let it rest over right where we know these corners are. Come over and hit these corners on this side again. And I'm just kind of rolling the iron over the corners a little bit, just to get them to grab a tiny little smidge on there. Let's check it again. There we go. Now our corners are nice and stuck. Everything feels great. So we'll let this cool for just a minute, but you can see this adhered our paper to our piece of wood, right? Let's get something that we can cut this out on and not ruin our excellent tablecloth that we have on here for Christmas projects. Got a little chunk of plywood that'll work nicely as a back for our cutting. But what I'm going to pull out now is a specialty tool. It's called a razor blade. Now, most men carry one of these knives in their back pocket, but if you don't, I'm going to give you a great tip. When you go to your Christmas festivities, make sure that you're the guy that has a knife in your pocket so that you can assert dominance over the other dads as the kids are trying to open up their presents. So we're going to come in here and we're just going to trim our paper right along the edge of our wood. Try to be as clean as you possibly can. And there you have it. You can see the edges are just a little rough. So what I'm going to do is come back with this super light sanding sponge and just hit just the edges. Make sure you don't get up onto the paper. But we're going to hit just the edges of the paper here, nice and neat, nice and light. That'll take any of those little fuzzies off of our corner from our super sharp utility knife that we use to cut it out. I believe there's a name to this process, something like laminating, possibly. I'm no laminator myself, so we're just going to pretend like we know what we're doing, right? There we go. Now all of our edges are nice and sharp. So now we've got our middle tree here. We're going to take that and set that off to the side. Now that our white paint is dried and our green is completely dried, we can come through with our water-based polyacrylic spray, fight with the child-proof cap on it again, give it a little shake, and then we're just going to put a quick little sealer coat on this. Now the finish we've got here is clear satin, and what that's going to do is, one, it's going to provide us with some protection to make sure this lasts. Two, it's going to ensure that if they ever get dust or anything on these as they're, putting them away and getting them back out throughout the years, all of that's going to be easily cleanable. But it's also going to add some depth. Since we use this water-based stain that we just created, this is going to really protect that and bring out the richness and the wood grain that we still have showing. So let's let this dry up and we'll get on to finishing our tallest piece, and then our set will be complete. For the decoration for our third tree, I would like to incorporate this flannel fabric. This stuff's really neat looking. It's a wire lined fabric. It's a ribbon, right? But one of the cool things about this wire lining is you can actually grab a hold of this wire and pull it out of that side. This is to help with forming if you're making things like bows. In this application, since we're going to be cutting it back around the edges of our tree, I don't necessarily want this wire in there. It's going to make it really difficult for me to get my knife in there and cut. So we're going to pull that out, and what I'm going to do is lay this flat on the table here, and I'm going to come in with this upholstery adhesive and give it a good spray. Make sure it's good and coated. We want everything to really stick. I can get this edge that's trying to curl up on me. There we go. And I found with this spray, if you let it set for just a few seconds and let it tack up, it really helps when you're applying. There we are, starting to tack up now. I'm going to take this and I'm going to pull it as flat as I can, try and get directly center down the middle of our tree here. And I'm going to press this down nice and flat. Make sure we start at one end and work our way down to the other end so we don't get any awful wrinkles down the center of it. Really press that into your corners. Get down both edges. If it's going to peel, around these edges and around our cut corners are where it's going to start peeling from. So let's make sure that those are nice and stuck. Right like that. And then we're going to let this sit and dry as well for another 20 minutes. And now that our fabric has dried on here, our adhesive, I went and got an X-Acto knife to make this stage just a little bit easier on myself. So we're just going to cut this out the same way that we cut our paper out, flip it upside down, and then just trace your piece. Go. So there you have it. Now we have 3 separate pieces that come together as a 3-piece set. This really adds value to our project when you go to sell these because people love getting things in a set or a bundle. It feels like they're getting more bang for their buck. Alright, so since this is a business and we are in this for money, let's run some numbers here and see where we're setting at. We've got our cedar fence picket that we used. Now, you buy these in 6-foot lengths. What we used was 22 inches. So you can actually make 3 sets of these out of a cedar fence picket. At the current price right now, a third of a cedar fence picket that we used is $1.15. The craft paint that we used for this project, we used a little squirt out of a couple different bottles. We're going to factor that in at 25 cents. Our scrapbook page came out to 10 cents. I got that in a book that covers all different seasons. So you can buy one book and you can be covered for multiple different holidays for your craft shows or for your events. Next, we're looking at the ribbon. The ribbon that I used actually came on a pretty large spool. We only used a small little section of it, so we're going to factor that in at about 10 cents. We've got our clear spray that we used, our polyacrylic. We used a few squirts out of that can, so I'm just going to total that in at 15 cents. And then let's add in just a miscellaneous just to cover any extras. We had our little bit of Mod Podge that we used, things like X-Acto knives, razor blades. All of that stuff is going to last you forever when you're making little stuff like this, but just to cover all of our bases and be conservative, let's add an extra 25 cents to that. So that gives us a grand total of a $2 cost, and I think at a craft show or some kind of a live event, you could sell this set for $20 all day long, stack them up, wrap them in a nice little neat twine string, set them out on display just as we see here so the client can see what they're getting. It makes them excited that they're getting 3 pieces instead of just one thing compared to the other booths. And you're looking at a solid 900% profit. That is a 10 times profit on this job. Now you can sit and crank these out. Like I said, a cedar fence picket will make 3 sets of these. So you're looking at $60 out of each cedar fence picket. And you can sit and batch out 10 of the green, 10 of the white, 10 of the ribbon. You can offer different ribbon sets so that way the customer has a choice. Do they want black and white? Do they want maybe a red and white or a red and black? Maybe you can find some holiday ribbon that would look nice to use on one of these trees. Switch it up a little bit, change your scrapbook pages, change your ribbon. All the green trees are going to be exactly the same, so you can just sit and pump those out as quick as you'd like. All in all, I think you could make about 10 sets of these a day. So you're looking at $180 profit per day to throw in a tote, to cram in your car, take to a craft show, get these out to people, take some business cards with you, and really learn to network with your small projects. All right, that's all I've got. If you liked what you saw here today, if you want to see more projects that sell, any tool tips, we're posting 3 to 4 videos a week, every single week, trying to grow the channel as quickly as possible. So please remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more content. Click the notification bell and switch that over to all so that you get a message anytime that I post a video and anytime that we go live. I love doing live streams now. It's really become a passion of mine here on YouTube, and I'd love for you guys to come hang out with me while we make things here in the shop. Have a good day. I'll catch you on the next one. You don't pull the iron off. That would be awful. Don't ever do that. Let's unplug this guy so it's not so hot and it's not gonna fall off and I'm gonna go to grab it and turn my hand to leather.